There you go. Hello, my friends. This is Shippy the Explorer. Back with you with another video. Today, on a more serious note, and the topic will be genealogy and research, and how, you know, yes, how do you reconnect your 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 name with others, and how do you rediscover who you are? The big discovery is your family genealogy is right there in your face, and it's not lost at all. Your genealogy information is right there in your face and not lost at all. So I profess myself as well. Let's welcome my faithful followers, and subscribers, and friends from all over the world, and especially the Caribbean and the Americas and England and Australia. And welcome back to this station. I often announce that Shippy the Explorer station is about genealogy, and you may not have taken me seriously, but today it just occurred to me that how can I say I'm a self-made genealogist and not telling you what I'm about? So that repeat that here we are. If you are in the process of researching your family, and you have been using ancestry.com, and you're using the other chromosome test and all that, you're welcome to it. But I'm old school, you know, and I started the old way, more than from 1972, and came up the whole way, and did my work the whole. I've traveled the world, and gone into the libraries of various countries, and whether in Jamaica, in Barbados, in England, Australia. Well, I've done a lot of research in Australia. I've gone there, in New Zealand, but I haven't done a lot of research. But I've done extensive work in England, and out in Medstone, London, that type of thing. And quite a bit of work in Barbados, and quite a bit of work, and most of my work was done in Jamaica. So I'll show you one book this morning. And here we are. This is how to recover your genealogy information the hard way. Now you have computers that you can probably log on to, and you can establish an account, and with ancestry.com, and you can gradually load up your information. But I'm telling you, here we are. This is what Shippy the Explorer is about to tell you. Now, I started out just seeing the death of my grandfather, and didn't see him die, but I know he passed away, and suddenly I was lost. And this is the book I put out, The Prism. So there's always a book around Shippy the Explorer to show you that I'm not just a freak about this thing. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about the information that is well, let's talk about why I got into this. 1974, my grandfather died, and suddenly he was quiet, and then I felt like I lost, because he looked partly mixed with a Caucasian mix, an African mix, and but because he was quiet, and I've seen during the funeral and before that, other members of the people were visiting the house, and they're saying, "Oh, we're aunt this and aunt that." And some look Indian, some look clear skin with us clear skin, some look dark skin. And I said, how can we have all this mixture in the family? And then suddenly my grandfather died, and then I felt left out of place. And he was so quiet, he didn't explain who he was in. Well, we didn't ask him a question. In the old days, you didn't ask people who they were, who their mothers were, and their fathers. Who did you know? Or when you see people visit you, just don't question who they are. You just accept that they're aunt this and aunt that and uncle that, and and you just think, but you know, because they've come so often, you know that they're really connected. And so I was there wondering, now, who am I? The name is strange. I can give you the name because it's called Giscom. And for those of the Giscoms who are out there, I'm the one who have been researching from 1974. And a lot of you have connected with me, and have now have the website Giscom Pen, www.giscompen.com, and a number of books, the Prism, and now going down under. Should have brought it to the show. So the information I've gathered there, part of it is in the book and part of it is on the website. But here I'm feeling just lost with my grandfather and at my grandfather's death. And I say, you know what? With all this strangeness of complexion and maybe say ethnic mix, something is very unusual with this family. And I started to research, and here we are. I went around the corner. First, tell you what you do. I went around the corner back to my grandfather's cousin, who Miss Pinny were telling all the time. When you go and visit her, she would say, you know, I'm your cousin, your grandfather's first cousin. My mother and your grandfather are sisters, and we are such and such and such and such. So I went back to her, and I got the information that she was trying to give out, and I started there. So the first thing you do in a genealogy search is go back to your guru. Guru, the storyteller, or the African who came with the African traditional of one person in the family or in the community that has the story of your life, and who knows about who, and you go back to the guru. So Miss Penny was my guru, and I went to her, and I got that information, and say, okay, let's line up. You are my grandfather's cousin, who was the mother, and so forth. And then I jot it down on a piece of paper, and I started drawing the lines from one generation to the next, and jot them down. Then I knew my aunts and my mother and my aunts and uncles, and I put them down on that as siblings of my grandfather. And then I knew my family to a certain extent, until I discovered, well, I knew who I was, but I didn't really confront that issue. We just talk about that on a different tape. But basically, I jot those down on a piece of paper, and I drew the line from line to line, and that you start out with your guru and get all the information that you can. Now, why I'm, as a genealogist, I'm saying there's the information about your lineage is tend not to be lost. It's out there someplace, because with color, I'm going to give you the history of this now. With colonization, especially with the British. After the Spaniards came in, they have their records. They went into Africa, and when they picked up the slaves, they jot down in their books how many slaves they got from maybe this tribe or from this port, but not necessarily say which tribes they came from, because their whole effort was to mix up the people by the time they reached the Americas and sell them off, because they didn't want two people from Cameroon or two from Timbuktu or two from the Mandingo tribe to be in the same group where they could communicate and then cause a riot or establish a mutiny on the ships. So they tried to mix up the families, separate the mothers from the kids and the husbands from the wives, and then by the time they reach the Americas, by the time they reach Barbados and Alabama, South Carolina, that type of thing, they were mixed. They sold them off as mixed people from Africa. But what I've discovered, what I've really discovered is this. And I'm going to give you my real name. If you want to contact me, is Laurel G. Morrison, and I'm the genealogist for one of them for the Giscombe family. If you want to contact me, you can look me up in Amazon.com or in Facebook, and you can find me if you want to contact me. But what I'm telling is history, is that the British had a systematic way of documenting everything around slavery. And even other than slavery, they had a systematic thing about the trade, where they would tell which ship, who sponsored the ship, when the ship left the port of maybe say Liverpool and head on into Africa, the west coast, and how many people were in it, who were there, who were on the ship, the ship was captain, how many pounds of this, how many pounds of food stuff, the doctor, and the captain was required to document all of these things. The sponsorship of the trip, who was sponsoring what, and you can look up that maybe in Kew Garden, but we'll talk about that a little more. So the British, I don't know much about the Spaniards, the Spanish or Spain or Portugal, but the British, because that's my research, I found out that they document everything. And then when I discovered that, I just said, oh my gosh, they even documented the complexion of the slave, the racial mix, if they were from Africa or if they were just genealogist, I can't remember the name now, born in the Americas or in Jamaica, Creole, that's the name of it. If you are born in Africa, you are African in the records, and if you are born in the Americas, like say Barbados and Jamaica, you are regarded as Creole, and that's what it is. But they put your sex, your ethnic mix, if they can. On the records I see the sex, if the male or female, the age if they can, the how much they bought you for, and sometimes the tribal mix. So where are those information stored? We found that they have back then you had the ship logs, and those ship logs are probably, I would safely think, they are probably in Kew Gardens in London for the British colonies, or they might be in Liverpool, or some of them are in Maidstone. But for the plantation logs, and for the slaves, and for the operation of the slaves of the plantations, those were records kept, made by the owners or the operator of the plantation. And if you had an overseer, he was required to log in his big books, how many slaves he bought this year, how many were born on the plantation this year, how many died, and how many products, and how much profit he made that year. And that was reported to the governor in every respective country, and those governors were required to send those information back to the colonial office, and those colonial offices in London in Kew Gardens. So those reports were called the returns. So Shippy, as an expert, I think I'm no expert, I'm going to tell you what it is. So that information was sent back to the colonial office where it was that day, but right now those information are in Kew Gardens. But then you have some local information that was stored in the archives, in the governor's record in this prospective country. Like for Barbados, and so they were kept maybe at the governor's office, and then after the governor left, I guess after that colonization period over, these records are now in the respective archives, whether in Cave Hill, like in Cave Hill or Barbados, or in Spanish Town in Jamaica. So that's the way. But let's go back to the genealogy part of it before we get more into some of the history. So I'm saying I discover that the information is sometimes, you think you're lost when you start to do this research, and you say you have moved away from your guru, and you have talked about the family, and you have gone through the paperwork that you have at home, and you have talked to your cousins, your brothers and sisters, the father and mother, some uncles and aunts, and you have gotten and some friends. And have you gone to the church also? Sometimes some records are at the church, the big books in the church where say some of the church members have been baptized. Those records are there. And then also there are records in the schools. You have some school records where you can go back to the local schools and you can get information there also. But every 4 or so years or 2 years or so, you feel lost and you say, oh man, everything seems to be lost, and never give up, because what's gonna happen from my experience is that you stumble on a piece of information that takes you another 5 years into your research, back another 5 years into your research. So let me tell you what I did, and that's what happened to me. So I've gotten all this, and I started jot down all these information, and then I went to Spanish Town, the Twickenham Park in towards Spanish Town in Jamaica, and I started the research. And those old days, you 1974, 75, in maybe 1980 up to 1980, I had access to the old books. Sorry I didn't jot down everything I saw. I went through all the books and just jot down all the names that are related to my family, and I jot them down, just jot them down, and say which parish, which plantation, what name and age and complexion or ethnic mix, and I just had that data. And then I gradually built my I discovered that that then I could start to plot the family tree on a piece of paper. Then somebody at the after I got all that information, I realized, or somebody must have informed me, that at the Twickenham Park here, apart from birth and death records, you have marriage and divorce and all that. You also have wills. You have wills and court cases and legit yes, court cases, wills, and those you can get at Twickenham Park in the big books. And then somebody recommended me to go to the archives in Spanish Town. Now, when I went to the archives in Spanish Town, that's up to maybe about 3 miles up the street. They have those big books stored in those, coming out of those back rooms. And believe me, folks, the English people, the English colonial government, and with all the agents, they documented millions of information. At the archives, there are actually records from slavery, going from slavery 1700s on, and even some 16 something, right where after the British took hold of 1655. The British took hold of Jamaica from the Spaniards. What became of the Spanish books, I don't know. You know, that's a good question. Even though I've been researching for so many years, I've never asked them what became of the Spanish books. Because when the British came in 1655 and they raided the country and they started to attack I think they came in at this in Twickenham, in Spanish Town region. The Spaniards, San Diego de la Vega, that was the name of the city for the Spaniards, the capital of Jamaica, Spanish Jamaica. And I sure the Spaniards weren't able to run away with their documentation. So there might be some records there. I've never asked about that. It would be interesting to know. So, but the books are in the archives there, and when you go, you can ask for. You look into the index, and for a particular area, for the plantation, say for instance in Portland and St. Mary, and you look into the those plantation records, the index, and you may see names related to the family. You jot those down, and when you ask for the actual book, then they go into the back and they bring the book, and you have to systematically read through them. So to give you a side story, most times I go to these archives. In the old days, you can't eat or drink in the library, but I would slip a crackers in my pocket here or there. And you can't carry I think you can't carry cameras inside there. Couldn't carry cameras, so you'll have to have a notebook and your paper and pen and or pencil, and that's how it. So I slip a crackers in my pocket and when I really get hungry, because I don't want to leave those old books, folks. Yeah, I just quietly chew and keep my energy up, and I'm in there from from the library open until they want to run me out sometimes. So those books are there. So then you have other books of whether than birth, you have baptism records, because what's happening with the slaves in Jamaica for particular in, in, in particular is that the British government had given the authorization to the colonizers that you go out, get slaves from Africa, and when you enslave them, you call them not infidels, or yes, non-Christians. The agreement was that you would baptize these slaves into the Christian faith, and and now they are a little bit more human being. Not fully human being, because in the Americas you were 3/4 of a human being. But those baptism records come there very handy, because you can, if you have a family member or more than one, you had family member who owned the plantation, and then they have slaves under the same name on the plantation, and then when the minister came on a particular day and carried all the slaves down to the river and started to baptize them left and right. So you'll find baptism records of a particular plantation in those records. And when you find those, you say, oh my gosh, they were baptized on such and such a date, whether as a child or an adult. And one good thing about the British, I noticed they had given the slaves at least a first name, and sometimes they give the slaves the last name based on the plantation they were, or really who owned them, or who was the father. And a lot of times in the Americas, you only have the birth record, and it says a female or a male that was born as such a thing, or such and such baptized. So the older system in the Caribbean was a little bit more humane. So you have baptism records, you have plantation records, you have death records, and then you have some church records, because what happened, the churches were required to turn over their, maybe annual or every 5 years, I'm not sure what the stipulation, but the Baptist Church of, say, for St. Mary was required to turn over their baptism records to the archives. And then some of those records are there also. So you can say, all right, the First Baptist Church of Guys Hill, they baptized a group of people over a period of time, and then you can see those records. A lot of records are there. So birth records, baptism records. Now later on we'll talk about the death records. So 16 something up to 17 something. But later on, about 1870, 1880, the official order came from the crown, saying, ordering the priests and the ministers of the respective churches that they need to start to document birth, marriages, birth, divorces, baptism of the child, death records, and those were also documented, jot down in the big books. And most of the times I've seen those mainly in like say Medstone or Kew Gardens. I've seen those. but a lot of times they are in right in the archives in Jamaica, Spanish Town. So let's talk about, so you can know that your records are out there, and I'll just say re- continue to reinforce where some of these records are. So for the regular um, say Christian records, other than the Catholic records, you find them at Twickenham Park, and then also the Spanish Town Archives, which is there. Now, the for the I just recently discovered that in the last 10 years or 12 years, I did not realize that the Catholic records were kept separately from the regular regular Baptist or so records in Spanish Town. These records are Catholic has their own archives, and that is in, we'd have to look it up. I didn't jot down the thing, but it's somewhere off Harfordtree Road in Kingston. So you can get information from that. You know, the Catholic churches weren't systematically sending their records to Twickenham Park. If you're in, repeat, if you're in Barbados, it's Cave Hill, up by the University of the West Indies, up on the hill there, and the archives is around there. They are, most of the archives offices, they have gotten strict in how you research. You have to go and tell who you are and make a registration, register, and then they allow you in, and then you can see some of those documents. If you're in England, you can go to Kew Gardens and some other county offices. Like I went to Kew Gardens, and then I also went up to Medstone, where I found some family information. Scotland, a lot of the records to Scotland were lost. I understand they got burnt in a big fire, so that was lost, but there are others there. So I'm not sure of where the records are. You'd have to look up the office. But Kew Gardens, don't let them fool you. Kew Gardens has the extensive, elaborate records of the colonial, all the records that's coming out of the colonies, whether in India or the Americas or the Caribbean, north or south, they're in Kew Gardens. And when you go to Kew Gardens, they might be mad with me, but you have to be specific and know what you're looking for, because they're not gonna really help you that much. Kew Gardens is very extensive, and if you don't have somebody who knows how to manipulate around the place, you're left there. I've been there 2 times or 3 times, and I've left there with very little. And a cousin of mine have gone there and found out that, what a good example, the Morant Bay Rebellion in 1865, I think, in Jamaica, was a ruthless thing. And my cousin went there and said, you know that every information for that Morant Bay Rebellion is right in Kew Gardens, and she sent it to me. Then I said, how did I go to Kew Gardens and ask for information? And I didn't get anything. So I've discovered that they're there. The place is very complex, so you have to know what you're looking for. You're looking for records of the colonies. You're looking for ship records. You're looking for military records there. You're looking for birth wills. You're looking for case information, where court cases. I've discovered that the cases court cases and where lawsuits and all that, they're there. And that's one of the ones that I got from my cousin, and it took me into another 50, 60 years back into history. So Kew Gardens, don't let them fool you. They are there. If you go to Medstone and all that, there, these people are more friendlier and they help you to work or those information. So sorry, I don't know the storage for the Spanish colonies, but I would safely think that Seville in maybe in Spain would have records. Dutch records might be in Holland or something like that, but they're there. These colonizers did not joke in documenting their work, but I found out that the British were more systematic in doing this. So Shippy the Explorer is telling the path I took, at least to get my research done from 1974. I've been doing this and I'm still going through as I think I'm now a self-made genealogist and know how to get around these things. Let's talk about some of the records you have to really write, inquire to the office and make an appointment. Say, okay, you're coming in a certain time, and you make your appointments, and you go in and you research and jot these things down, one by one, step by step. Your genealogy, your history is never too far. Now, if anybody in America is wondering why I'm leaving out America, is because I did not do too much work in the Americas, but before America was they were there, and they are the first 13 colonies. I think those colonial offices in the Americas had their own records. So you may want to go to the state office, the capitals of these states, and inquire of if they have archives of the information from slavery until now. And they do. I know they do have those. So, but if you want, you can go to the it's called the archives, the Library of Congress. This is really, if you're in Washington D.C., you can go to the Library of Congress and you can get information from those records. There you'll find plantation records, you'll see birth and death and church records, you'll find pictures, you'll find war records, you'll find Civil War and the War of Independence records. All that is at the office in it's warm, so I'm looking down to see if I see snakes. Wow, don't be scared. Black snakes also, this time of the year they're running around, so see me looking. So in Washington you'll find those, and yes, at the Library of Congress and so forth. So, but since my days, 1974 till maybe it's about 19, I started in 1974 and I was doing all this research and running around like Dickens, and then I discovered what I discovered by 19 89, I discovered that what had happened is that the moment the Latter day Saints church movement had, was making an instrumental effort in going into the archives and books of the various countries and making copies of these records, whether slave records, whether birth and death and marriages and wills and all these things. And because I can tell you what they wanted to do, because the Latter-day Saints Church has a program where if they're saying if your ancestors had died with and not being a Christian, just a minute, and not being a Christian, then they could, if you can prove who your ancestors were, your grandfather, great-grandfather, great-great-grandparents, they could post-mortemly baptize your ancestors and bring them into the fold of Christ. And that was the original, that's the main, I would safely say that's the main reason why they went across, they have been going across the whole world and making documentation of these various birth and death and all this genealogical information, because they wanted people to be able to research and and prove who your ancestors were. So if you want, you could baptize them after they are dead. So I discovered that the moments the Latter-day Saints had records, man. And by this time, 1980 something, I was living outside Washington. And I went over to the office in Kensington, over in near towards Bethesda, Silver Spring, and I looked, and they said, yes, these are the records they have. They're all digitized, and the records are kept in Salt Lake City, the actual letters. So what they've done is send these researchers, say for instance in Spanish Town, and they take a book and they make a documentation. This book is the slave records for this plantation for a period of this. And they take pictures of every page of that book and they log it into these, and they put it in the microfiche, and then those indices, then you can at Kensington you can go through the indices and look and see, find reference to your name. And then in the old days, what I used to do is go to the office and make a recommendation for them to send me the actual roll, photo roll in a microfiche roll of that record. So I will be able to say, for instance, in my family, I was able to look at the actual birth area for my grandfather. Couldn't find it in Jamaica. And one night about 10 o'clock at night, just before the office was closed, I was rolling through and looking at all the records of my particular family, Giscombs, that born in particular year in St. Mary, in Richmond. And behold, about 10 something at night, I found my grandfather's record in Washington, in the Latter-day Saints records. I was crying. And there I never forget that. When I found that, I found it outside the country in the Latter-day Saints. So when I wrote my book, I have given complimentary I compliment the Latter-day Saints, give them credit for their program, you know, and that's what I've done. And so you can, but now what the Latter-day Saints have done, they have gone and made a website, and the website, you can go family search, www.familysearch.org, and you can go on that website and you can establish your own link and your own account, and you can systematically go through the names and search and make jot. As you get the information, you create a family tree, electronic family tree if you want. I can pull those names on it. So that's how far we have gone. I've gone from the book way, and now they have done it. So I'm proud of myself. I've started way before these people even had computers. I started before computer days. So that's the Latter-day Saints. And I tend, for Jamaica, I would recommend the Latter-day Saints familysearch.org website even more than how I would recommend ancestry.com. For some, especially for the Caribbean, the British colonies, in the Caribbean, I would recommend them highly. I would highly recommend them. But the Ancestry.com thing is also good, but I find that a little bit of mistakes have been made, and repeated information have been made in the other records. And because, for one reason, is that the transcribers, are the ones who are researching the information, they too have been making a little bit of mistake in reading the documents in the actual book. They are not easy information. They're in English, but they are written in Old English, and if you're not careful, Old English, say for instance, F was written as a S, or S was written as a F, R was written as a line coming down, long stroke, and that type of thing. So when you're transcribing the names and the information from the old books, you have to spend some time in understanding the translation. Learn how to translate the information and pay particular thing in how these things are written. The writings were fancy. The writings were elaborate. A lot of curvature, and and when sometimes you see these log books, the information that is documented there were beautiful handwriting. But before, when they started way back in when the crown came down and asked the churches to start to document birth and death and death, some of these priests or ministers, I think they were drunk, because what they wrote was just a scribble, or maybe they weren't able to read or write themselves, because some of it was a mess. So you'll find that over the years, this is another part of the research. Don't be surprised if, say for instance, your name was Ford, and like Ford, and since S was written as F, and you say, leave it away and say you're Ford, and maybe your name was really Sword, that type of thing. And you find that when you go back 200, 300 years, your name was probably started out as one way, and as you go every 100 years or so, you find that the name is changing as it goes into the future, because these record keepers were either they start to understand some of the writings, or the ones who are jotting down the information, and when you say, tell me your name, then they're hearing the wrong thing. Yes, or they hear what they want to hear, especially um, outside Ellis Island in America was famous for that. Um, when the colonizers or the immigrants came to Ellis Island, and the officers say, "What's your name?" and you say Chaskuski, and you pronounce it. They're writing down. They say, "All right, that sounds too long." You say Jack or something like that. Jot down what they wanted to write down. So your original name might be might most likely have been spelled differently. In my particular family, I have about 10 different ways of writing the family name, and I see how it evolves from one end to the next. So when you hear, say for instance, go back to Sword and Ford, you may say, oh, it's a different family. But if you go back into the old records, oftentimes it's the same family. You know, you know. So that's what as I discovered. So don't be alarmed that you are part of the family. So what you have to do these days now, since we have DNA, we can ask the family member who is across the street and say, all right, your name sounds familiar like mine, but can we do a DNA test to see if we share common ancestors back then? And one of the programs who Dr. Gates on PBS, I think, he's doing a wonderful job. I'm just proud of myself that I was even before Dr. Gates. I'm going back way back. But he does a wonderful thing where he does the records, and he also at the end does the DNA to prove that you are connected somewhat. So I finally have put this tape together to say that Laurel G. Morrison as a self-made genealogist, and now we are doing Giscombe Pen, Shippy the Explorer. So I have all these names under the auspices of Giscombe Pen. I have Shippy the Explorer, and I'm always saying I'm a genealogist, but I've never realized, I've never given you how did I start this. I didn't talk about it. How did I start, and how I have maneuvered myself over the years. I've been doing this from 1974, so it's 70, 80, 90, 100, 110, so 50 years of doing this. So this is where I'm at, and now I have a couple books. Now we have actually 3 books under my name. 2 are on Amazon.com, Laurel G. Morrison or Laurel Morrison, and go out and look at them, and you can, and the family book, for those who have Giscombe's, Giscombe, or Giscome or Giscomb, you can contact me and look up my name. I can give it to you. It's a 304-704-3629, and call me if you need help, and I can point you to some specific information. So there you are. That's the information that I want to part with you. And the topic is saying your family genealogy is right there in your face, not lost at all. It's right there. The records often just sit there, and it's for you to stumble on another key part of the research to to take you into another aspect of your research. And if you love it like me, you'll be going into the libraries and without. You eat something, go into the library, you spend all day, and when the library is about to close, they want to kick you out. Because don't be surprised. I went to Barbados and I researched all week. And just before I took the plane, I stopped at another office just before I left. And guess, that's what I found my family in Barbados, and they're from St. Lucie. And I'm telling you, the ones who were in Barbados, they're spelling their names as Discombe, but I think they're the same family. But I found the real records while coming at the office just before I took the plane. So I said, oh my gosh, I have to return. And so I did return more than once. So never you be surprised if as you walk out the door, the last book you pick up for the night, you'll be surprised. You're finding records that you want. You just have to return to these things. So that's the genealogy part of me, Shippy the Explorer. It's a long tape, but be mindful of that, because what I'm giving you is information of how you go about these research. And now it's all over the place. You have pictures, computers, but the records, if you like books and whole heavy, beautiful written documentation, just go into the archives and look and search. And don't be in a rush, but ask questions and be diligent and rediscover your family from all over the world. And then you're going to find out that you're ethnically mixed, especially if you're in the Jamaican, the colonization period. You're ethnically mixed with Indian, African, you're Cameroonian, you're Nigerian, you're Dutch, you're English, you're Scottish. And if you like that type of thing, you say, thank God, I'm part of the soup. If you don't like it, you might be mad. And some of my cousins will say, okay, those guys raped my family and all that. But if you like it on a whole, you have now rediscovered that your history has not been lost, and you are part of the human family. If you hear my number, if you hear anything and want any question, call me. Take care. Sorry. Take care. I may do another tape another time. But be good. Walk good. Oh, sorry. Pollen is here. Walk good. Before I cough again, bye. Let me do a short tape of closing properly because I was coughing there. This is Shippy the Explorer saying thanks for watching. Thanks for sharing and understanding these things. You have seen my name, number, and do contact me if you want. Share this tape. Hopefully you've learned something, and I am still here to tell you more and say Shippy the Explorer is still researching as Laurel G. Morrison. If you really love this genealogy part of these things, this life, you'll never stop. So have fun and be good to yourself and others, and tell people who you are. Enjoy also the travels as you go along. Take care, walk good, and we'll talk to you some other time.